Hi, everyone, and welcome to the AEE podcast. I'm Soheil Sahamifar, podcast series lead for AEE GTA, and I'm pleased to launch our first podcast series. Today, I'm very pleased to introduce our guest, Rafael Kolenko, co-founder of CarbonCap. Thank you so much for being here, and let's get started. To start, Rafal, could you briefly introduce yourself and explain what inspired you to start CarbonCap technology for building efficiency?
Oh, great. Thanks for that question. It is a pleasure being here, and it's exciting, obviously, as this being one of the early days of the podcast for AEE GTA, and we're rapidly learning how quickly the importance of the engineering community is to innovations. And I think that's really something that I need to get off my chest, and we really thank Keyshawn and his team at the AEE GTA chapter for that. So yeah, what inspired me, I think if you'd have to go back almost 7 or 8 years ago, we're sitting in a Tim Hortons having our usual coffee, a couple hockey dads, and we're just talking about climate change. We're looking down at the Globe and Mail, and the next thing I know, I'm looking up at this building, which is right beside our building in Hamilton, and I noticed that there was a lot of smoke coming out of the top of the building, and I thought, okay, I'm looking down at the Globe and Mail. It says we're having a climate emergency, and there's lots of problems, and yet I look up at the top and I see all this smoke coming out. Now, the smoke at the time, I learned that it was just actually, high temperature vapor. It does have methane in it. It was probably polluting, and I later found out it's about 7% actually of it is not good for the atmosphere. So I'm thinking, why are we letting this happen? And so seeing that pollution coming out of the top of the building, and then seeing the newspaper article at the time 7-8 years ago, and the climate situation, I thought, why doesn't somebody fix this? And that's where I set out on the quest to fix this problem. And it was a 7.5, almost 8-year journey to get to this point.
Oh, okay. That was a very interesting journey. So let's go to the next question, Rafael.
Sure.
We're going to focus more on the technical side about your experience, your company, and everything else. CarbonCap focuses on improving heating and cooling efficiency in existing building. What problem did you find in the market that traditional retrofit approaches were not fully solving?
That solution didn't come right away. It took us some time to develop the technology. So basically, we had to figure out if the idea of capturing or stopping these boilers from emitting the problem that we recognized, that took quite a few years. And then when we actually met a building owner in 2018, which was this building here at O'Shanter Properties, I talked to the owner, and Adam said, well, you've got a great invention, sounds great, why don't you put it in the building? And so that's when the process began of learning what actually needed to be done and why it needed to be done, and then all the problems that needed to be solved doing that. By the way, Adam was an engineer himself, so not only is he a building owner, but he's also an engineer. And so he understands the concept of capturing wasted flue gas energy, so that was a big win for us. But how do we do that? And I thought to myself, what's the easiest way to capture this flue gas? And I said, simple. We'll take the existing boiler stacks and we'll divert it to a common collection plenum, and then we'll economize whatever heat we can capture from it and dump the rest outside. A very simple process in my mind. And so I thought, what would I have to do in terms of disturbing the building? And I thought, well, I'd have to turn the water off for about 4 hours, and I'll put a couple teas in, and we'll preheat the incoming cold water, and we'll also preheat the boiler return. And this is basically just 4 plumbing tees and a TY arrangement in the dampers, and we'll bring all that available energy over to a collection plenum. And so to me, that seemed like a very simple way to solve the problem. Again, early days, I didn't know about all the complexity of solving some of these issues and what companies have suffered in the past. And so we found out that using a different type of material that would help increase the efficiency of what we're recovering was important. But basically, we solved the issue of retrofitting a building by simply shutting off the water for about 4 hours and having a mechanical crew spend maybe a week in that boiler room. None of the tenants needed to be disturbed, and that was always a big problem for the building owners. And our system was so simple, yet nobody was really doing it.
Yeah, very cool. So, I really like to go deeper, and let's go to the other question. So, like in existing buildings, what makes heating and cooling efficiency so difficult to improve without any disruption to occupants or operations?
For sure. As if for example, if you turn the Wi-Fi off in your house and you have several kids like myself, I remember, not so long ago that it was a nightmare. Now that's just turning off the Wi-Fi. So imagine turning off the water and what would happen, especially if you have girls in the house. It's a big problem. So now equate that to building owners and operators. If you turn off the water in the building, that becomes a problem. And so the building, people can't wash dishes, they can't take showers, they got to get to work on time. They're already paying X number of dollars for rent. It's important for them where they live, and you're disturbing them. So yeah, it's a big problem. If you want to basically do a deep retrofit in a building and get the building to a super great efficiency, one, it's probably going to be an expensive process. Two, you're going to have some building disruption. And in fact, we understand that some building ownerships actually have to relocate tenants, and that becomes a big problem. So that's why we thought this simpler retrofit solution was more important for the buildings, and that's just some of their struggles, I guess.
Yeah, very interesting. I want to ask a follow-up question about heat recovery.
Okay.
From a mechanical systems perspective, how can better heat recovery or thermal recovery can support decarbonization for multi-residential or commercial buildings?
Right. Like I mentioned, it's really, heat recovery game is a big problem, and I think it's more about most of the traditional solutions are more about increasing efficiency and energy reduction as opposed to heat recovery. So if you can put outdoor temperature sensors and a building automation system that helps better utilize the existing energy that you're consuming, that's usually what happens. Capturing heat energy traditionally is done in more commercial, industrial production situations, and they've been capturing large-scale manufacturing, recovering heat energy for many years. It's only been in recent years where they're getting thermal energy. I guess some of the early days innovations were capturing it from the drains from buildings, and so the wastewater drain heat is captured. I'm not sure what the percentage of recovery is on that, but these are things that were all spun by obviously climate change and the need to get greater efficiency. Capturing the energy with the carbon cap technology, our flue gas economizer, so the FGR system, basically economizes the wasted heat from the boilers. So if the boilers are operating at 85% efficiency, that means that there's 15% efficiency left on the table. Where is it being lost? Well, probably about 12% of it is being lost through the stack, 12% of the overall efficiency, and then a few more percentage through the venting material and through the body of the boiler. So the problem is we traditionally use stainless steel to capture that energy, and we go through these heat recovery devices that are only 3 to 5% effective. And what carbon cap did was we used an economizer that is 20 times more conductive than the traditional economizers, and we're able to maximize all that energy that we're capturing. So what do we do with the thermal energy, as you asked? We take that recovered energy and we use it to preheat the incoming cold water to the building. So if we've got some domestic water coming into the building at 50 degrees, we can often bump that to 100 degrees before it gets to the tanks just behind us. And that makes the boiler's job a lot easier, and that's the latent energy. And then we also take some of the sensible energy and we use that to preheat the boiler return. So as I mentioned earlier in our conversation before the podcast, the set points in a lot of these buildings is 150 odd degrees, and the return line will come back at about 130. So we often bump that by a delta T of 10. So we'll bring that up 10 extra degrees to make the boiler's life a little easier and obviously conserve some gas. So we're capturing the sensible and the latent heat energy with our economizer.
Well, actually, that was very instructive, and thank you so much for your detailed explanation. For the next question, I'm going to ask a question about your contribution with AEE GTA. So, as you know, you have been involved with AEE GTA, both as a sponsor and industry participant. What value do you find by engaging directly with engineers and energy professionals through AEE?
Sure. That's a great question. In fact, we've always been engaging with the local community and understanding it, mostly at an academic level. And so we were actually early days of our project, we were inspiring young engineers in a college level back in Hamilton. And now subsequently, we're working with a few of the universities in Toronto with capstone projects and seeing the value in the engineering department. So I think us and our relationship now with the AEE is just a progression of this academic relationship that we had with the local academic community. And so what value would the AEE GTA have for us? I think the biggest value is endorsement of our technology. A lot of building owners get inundated every day with lots of options, lots of opportunities. Hey, buy my system. I can save you this. I can save you that. And so having that type of engineering community behind us to endorse our papers and thesis and also our general technologies that we're developing is really an important part of our overall game plan.
Yeah, actually, it's very great to have you as our sponsor. And, having these kind of like technical tools like we have today is, very instructive for all AEE members. Thank you so much about that. So let's go to the last question. Looking ahead, what do you think will be the biggest barrier to building decarbonization technologies, cost, awareness, regulation, or market adoption?
I think it's a combination of both. In fact, I'm recently just finishing a thesis on utilizing higher efficiency boilers. So as you know, in Canada, we have several laws, or rather regulations coming from NRCan and other provincial levels that are pushing building operators to a higher efficiency boiler system. And I think so that policy is very important to recognize that and the barriers that are involved in that. But the good news is that we're developing a program that examines the existing infrastructure that's available. It's very easy to correct this problem if you have carte blanche to remove everybody from the building, send in mechanical crews for months, and you have unlimited number of dollars to fix your building. What are the odds of that happening in many buildings here in the GTA and across Canada? A lot of the ownership, just doesn't have that kind of available budget to do that. Maybe some of the larger portfolios have already put programs in motion. Obviously, the building automation controls is a big part of that transition. But I think for us, it's more about having a combination of informing the policy and stakeholders about the solutions that we have and perhaps get them endorsed by the engineering community. And that will obviously help justify the solution itself with the ownership and operators of the buildings. So that's our hope, and that's where we'd hope to go with this technology that we've invented for this building. Carbon Cap is also working on not just economizing flue gas, but we have a building control system which better regulates the heat across the building. So as you know, some buildings get overheated by several things. One, boilers. The sunny side of a building gets overheated, and we have a heat control system that corrects that problem thermostatically in a building. But the ultimate would be converting the building to a heat pump system and a lot of the infrastructure isn't suitable for that. So we have some new technology that we're pioneering and hoping to pilot called exotherm, and that technology will completely decarbonize the building and go along with the goals for electrification.
Yep. Thank you so much. So actually, I agree that heat pump is one of the biggest solution for decarbonization and electrification. So thank you so much,
No
Rafal, for sharing your insight today.
Sounds good.
And thank you to everyone listening. If you want to learn more about AEEGTA or tours and upcoming initiatives, please visit aeegta.org. We look forward to seeing you in our future episodes.